What do you think of some of your colleagues on this strike?
Well, I actually feel for them because...
I don't. I think they're a bunch of lunatics. I think they are the worst possible people. I wouldn't want one coming anywhere near me.
But they're not going to.
I have cancer.
You might not have that choice if you're going into A&E or any...
I'm not going into A&E the way it is at the moment because, quite frankly, it's unworkable.
You might be able to afford private healthcare, which, unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues are now moving on to private healthcare because they're not getting remunerated.
Well, that's okay. Just a minute. That's okay if you can afford private healthcare. A lot of people can't. I can't even get insured. My wife had a burst appendix a few months ago. She went to A&E and she was left writhing on the floor for nearly 12 hours. So there's not a lot. I'm feeling very...
Was it a strike day?
I'm not sure.
That can be a normal day in the NHS.
Exactly.
It was a random
that is
day.
the point. And that is the point. That so even on non-strike days, this is the condition of the NHS.
Yeah, do you know why?
We're losing staff. And this has been from pre-pandemic.
No, that is because the management of the NHS is complete and utter shocking. Okay? And it needs to be disposed of, and we've got really great doctors, nurses,
medical people. Then you tell me, why are the doctors being blamed and scapegoated in this whole mess that is being created?
What doctors are being blamed?
Well, all over the media. It's like
not.
Doctors are all over.
No, but it's because, you know, what happens is people have their things cancelled and then they have to wait 6 months and then they might have it'd be too late to do it. So it will cost lives.
The waiting lists were going up before the strike started.
Yeah, but that doesn't help someone who's got an appointment next week and now it's moved 6 months and now they're going to die because of that.
Here's the thing, the conversation's been ongoing. The strike has been the last thing that we wanted to do. We didn't even want to go on strike.
But don't you accept it causes people to die?
Well, what
do you not
are you saying? Correlation is the same as causation?
No, I'm just saying that if they miss an appointment and they get it 6 months later, it's spread then, and it's too late for them.
This was already happening before the strikes. There's no causal link.
For that specific person,
because the
NHS
NHS
the next day, and
are useless. You agree?
I have worked for the NHS. I still work for the NHS. Yeah. I absolutely swear by my colleagues. I know how hard they work.
Look, so some of them aren't even doctors. They wear stupid, silly little orange hats. They cheer the whole time. They're not interested in saving people's lives. They are not interested. They get well paid. They get well paid eventually if they're any good at their job. And if you don't like it, bugger off and go somewhere else, because quite frankly...
And they are doing that, exactly. That is why the NHS in the States...
What they're doing is they're going out on strike, hoping to make a point, which now is failing. And we need the government. I have no sympathy with this government or the opposition.
I'm in agreement with you, sir. I think we agree on one thing.
Why do they want 35%? The one in Scotland have accepted, what was it, 11%?
Because the conditions are different, the government's different, the way the hospitals are run is different.
The government in Scotland are pretty useless,
the pressures on the NHS is different. NHS is different in the...
But isn't it because the union is politicised and that's why it's against the English government?
I'm not talking about the politics side of things. I'm talking about, as a junior doctor, what my reasons are for going on strike. And I feel...
Are you on strike at the moment?
I'm not personally on strike myself.
I'm glad. If you'd said yes, I would have shown you the door.
But doctors have never done it before, have they? So do you think that actually... Have they?
Well, I mean, several years ago,
yeah, but not before that, not in the last...
Just a minute. The worst week in the year for people getting ill.
No. There is no good week. And we've seen this with the numbers in terms of... We've been having this conversation...
Generally, they think this is... Christmas and New Year is particularly bad.
There's been many Christmases and many New Years which have been dire. They've just not been reported.
So it's still not... Do you not understand... Shut up, Ash, a minute. Do you not understand that people are having their operations suspended? People are not being able to go and see a doctor who are seriously ill. I'm lucky. I'm being treated for terminal cancer. I've been diagnosed. I know I don't have long to go. I've come to terms with all of that. And the staff who've been looking after me are doing a brilliant, great job. And you should hear what some of them say about the BMA, the NHS and the striking doctors. They are not happy.
I can see exactly why they wouldn't be happy. We're not happy to be striking either.
Well, don't strike.
We would rather be at work.
Don't strike. Go back to work.
Better conditions. Under better conditions. That's what our asks are.
The conditions will get better.
But will it cause...
The conditions will get better if there are more doctors.
No,
if we can retain more staff. If we can recruit more staff, more doctors, train them better. Have a better environment to train the doctors.
Won't happen.
Right, I'll tell you a story, right? When I started as an FY1, straight out of medical school, I probably got half a day of training and I was thrust straight into the wards. I was just fumbling around, running after the consultant, trying to pick up the pieces. It was myself and another FY1 and nobody else beside the consultant.
Good way to learn.
Life, literally all my career, 4 years I've been a doctor now, it's been understaffing. Pre-pandemic this is as well.
So you're sacrificing patients who will die at this strike for the longer-term good. So do you accept people will die because of these strikes?
The patients have been dying pre-pandemic.
No, but do you accept people will die, excess will die because of the strikes?
There's no causal relationship.
Answer the question.
If they miss an appointment and then it's too late because the cancer's spread, they'll die.
Answer the question.
There were waiting lists that were going up even before the strikes.
You're not answering the people who had an appointment the next day.
I'm talking about
an individual who had an appointment the next day. It's cancelled 6 months. It's too late. They're going to die because of the strikes.
Field of medicine
That's going to happen across the country.
Is a field of science and maths and all that, right?
That?
You agree to science and art, okay? So I like to think of life as a graph.
So you average this out and you go, these people will die for the longer term good of...
2013, the waiting lists were at 2.5.
So you're sacrificing these short-term patients that will die.
2020, we were double that, 4 million, cancelled appointments, and waiting lists were going up then.
Are you still proud of your colleagues?
6.5. So if you're looking at the graph, even if the strikes hadn't been happening, that would have been happening.
Of your colleagues?
Well, it's not.
Am I proud of my colleagues? I'm proud of my colleagues for standing together and wanting to fight together. Why did you choose
not to go on strike?
Well, a lot of my colleagues, including myself, we are having to pick between whether we can afford to strike or not because we miss out on pay.
But you can work private. Some of them are making more from the strikes.
You do some private work, don't you?
Privately.
Do you do some private work?
You actually... No, I don't.
Could you do private work if you wanted to, or do you have to be more experienced?
It's against our contract to take up work on strike days privately if we're supposed to be at work. Either we work or we strike.
So they shouldn't
if we strike, we don't get paid.
So they shouldn't. That's actually. Are you saying that's fraud? The ones that are saying they're working on strike days when they
well, if they're working, that must be within their contractual.
They may
obligations.
be private, yeah.
It might be different for them.
Right, but that's cynical. That is because.
So how many more doctors in your hospital do you want?
Oh, I would be great if we just at least met the minimum staffing. Most of the time, this was even before pandemic, before all of this. When I first started, we were not meeting minimum staffing levels at my hospital when I was working up north in the Midlands.
And whose fault is that? Because the NHS... No, it's not the government.
It's been years, it's been decades of underfunding.
Calm down. I'm so angry, I've got to be really careful.
There are hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Just a minute. So the management of the NHS find the time and the money to go to other countries and get doctors and nurses to come here, which is why I have no time or patience for the NHS. They disgust me, and why we should be helping them not going on strike. It's got nothing to do with the government refusing to give you a 35% increase, because you're never, ever going to get that. And the way you behave, the strikers, obviously not you, but the way they're behaving is disgusting. And they don't seem to me to be the right kind of people to want to be a doctor.
Yeah, the one that was gloating about getting Christmas off and stuff. You've got that sort of person involved.
Or the one we interviewed, somebody interviewed on the station the other day, who was going, I have to go to a food bank because I just can't afford it. And then we found out that him and his...
That is the reality. For a lot of people.
It's not.
I can say for myself as well.
He was on 60 grand and he said he couldn't afford lunch. Doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
Well, is that before or after tax? And that's another thing.
Even after tax, I could get lunch for that. It'd be about 35
we all pay tax.
Not just the tax.
We all pay tax.
Stop going to Pret a Manger.
There's so many additional costs to being a doctor, whether it's exams.
Why should our viewers and listeners pay more in tax to pay people like you who seem to feel they have a right to get whatever they want?
I don't think we're asking for the taxpayer to pay more.
Of course you are. Where's the money going to come from?
We are holding the government accountable.
Why are you holding the government accountable?
For squandering the money, that taxpayers' money.
They didn't squander the money. The NHS management squandered the money.
Well, they're all linked, though, aren't they?
It's very well funded, the NHS.
What worries me is you don't understand the situation of how things work, and that really does worry me. You don't understand. The NHS are given a certain budget from the government, from what they can afford, because we all have to pay for it, and they cannot afford that. In fact, to be honest, if I was in charge, we will be cutting back the flipping amount.
I think we should change the system, because I think.
And do you seek private healthcare or do you seek
I cannot get any private.
Let's adopt the French system, which works and costs about the same, and it's perfect.
Do you think I'm lying to you?
I'm not saying anything.
Well, do you think I'm lying?
Well, I would like to ask you what you just told me, that your team that have handled your healthcare are excellent.
Yeah.
So they must be doing something good.
They are.
Yes.
I haven't criticised doctors and nurses in the main. They are doing a brilliant job. Listen to what I'm saying.
I'm hearing what you're saying.
Telling you the government can only do so much. The opposition don't have any idea. And the NHS that can pay, what is it, 250 diversity people?
Oh, right.
100 grand a year each? That is a disgusting waste of money. And whoever sent me a diversity form to fill in from...
Oh, yeah, that was me, yeah. Can you tick the right boxes? Make sure you tick the right boxes.
Well, whoever it is to blame, ultimately the whole system needs rejigging.
I couldn't agree with you more.
It's a sacred cow, and you get short-term government, they're not going to do it. So that's the trouble, isn't it? That's ultimately the problem.
Well,
What would you do? Would you adopt the French system or the German system where you can just get a consultant straight away and it's all tickety-boo?
You know, I think there's lots to be learnt from all the different systems around the world.
What would you do?
What would I
you've thought about it.
do?
What would you do
Well,
tomorrow?
I personally think that a £1 billion surcharge on the NHS is nothing compared to how much the government has been spending on various other things, whether it's...
Forget other things.
It's not about money, though, is it? Because how much money you chucking
foreign wars and things like that getting involved. The taxpayer has to pay for it, ultimately. They've been wasting all this money that they spent during the pandemic.
Stop wars so we can pay for the NHS. I mean,
OK, how will you stop wars?
Weren't you saying that earlier?
How will you stop wars?
Well... You know...
No, you tell me. And why are you being a doctor when perhaps you should go into politics?
I definitely don't want to go into politics.
But you sort of are, aren't you?
Yeah,
are you not
but you are.
You sort of are.
How am I?
Well, speaking here, are you not part of any organisation?
Well, she must be. She wouldn't be here otherwise.
I'm not part of a... What kind of organisation are you referring to?
No, I just thought you might be from a doctor's...
Before we do that, never mind about that. I want you as a junior doctor to tell me...
I represent myself.
I want you to tell me how you would solve the problems.
I would restructure where the money is being spent and where the budget...
They do that every 20 years, and it's just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic.
I would go back in conversation with the doctors.
What is the biggest waste of money in the NHS at the moment that the management are wasting money on? Now, we've said diversity is a huge waste of money because it does nothing and it means nothing. So where would you start saving money?
There's so much. There is so much. I mean, we know that the systems are run inefficiently. By just...
Do you have too many managers? Do you report to too many people?
Potentially, but again, I report to my consultant and my immediate bosses are doctors, so I sympathise with them. Who they report to, I'm not talking about.
Have you heard any bad stories yourself along the way? You don't have to name names or hospitals, but about management cock-ups?
There's loads of conversations
every
here
time
and there
I
all
go
the
into
time. I don't want to go
about
on hearsay because I'm, you know, I haven't seen it. But of course, having worked on the grounds, I have seen how inefficient the system is. So what, from your point of view, would you do in your hospital, which we haven't mentioned, what would you do in your hospital to improve things? If it was really down to me, I would, increase the staffing levels to a point where people are not feeling burnt out, where people can do their job more efficiently. People are not doing so much of paperwork.
Let's not jump forward. Yeah. You could always get people to do paperwork who are not doctors or nurses, and I agree with that. But
and there's a problem with that also.
Oh, right. Go on.
The problem there is that then we don't... Either we have to check what they've written or, you know, what's been written. That is medical documentation. It's really important.
But aren't nurses more qualified? They've sort of increased nurses' qualifications to take over some of the roles that were previously done.
So would it be quicker for you to fill out the forms and stuff, and maybe your senior
I know we have a call here that tells us that.
There's not enough staff all around.
Surely it's cutting management and wastage and employing it in medical
senior
staff.
Managers, there are too many of them.
Well, if you're saying so, there must be some truth to it.
Well,
but ultimately, a system has to run, and they have to rely on managers. We
used to have sisters and matrons, and we didn't have layers and layers of management, and it used to work very well, didn't it?
I was in a lift in a very well-known big London hospital the other day, and there were a couple of blokes in suits in there, one with a clipboard, and they're going through their... discussing what kind of paint they could do for what sort of wall, and laughing and joking as, oh, this is such a good job. And
what did they pick?
Grey. So I wasn't in the lift long enough to have a word.
Should have stayed in.
I know. But it beggars belief that there are all these people that the NHS management do not seem to realise and understand they don't have the money. And we could solve any problem going if we threw more money at it. But because of the pandemic, we don't have a lot of money left. And we can all say, oh, we'll have done that differently. But so great with hindsight. And so I think that you need to understand, or people in your position with your views, that it isn't the politicians, because I don't think if we had a Labour government it would be any different. There is only so much money to go round. And the management has grown in the NHS like, what's that word? It grows like Topsy.
So I'm hearing a lot of things that you're saying, and I agree to a large extent in terms of there's a lot of focus on, you know, the inefficiencies of hospitals, and actually hospitals take up a large budget of the health budget, essentially. Well, really, we should be focusing on prevention, and really the budget needs to be restructured to be focused more on primary care and empowering GPs. I'm a GP training myself, and you know, if I had...
Well, that'll be good, because you won't have to do anything much. I can never get hold of a GP, can you?
No, well, people don't even bother now.
Believe you me, I agree with you as a patient, because I can't get hold of my GP. However, that speaks to the exact problem.
As you're a GP?
I can't treat myself, unfortunately. No, I can't even treat my own family members. So I can't even prescribe for my own family members.
What are your thoughts, because we're running out of time, I bet you're glad in a minute. What do you think of the 4 million gift vouchers that have been given to staff by the management?
I think that's silly.
It's more than silly, it's disgusting, isn't it?
It's silly because it's just a band-aid on the problem. It doesn't, I mean, what is 4 million gift vouchers? What's that going to buy someone a house? It's not going to help pay your mortgage.
No. Well, it's a waste. It could be spent on medical. I mean, also another point that there's these machines that cost millions of pounds, scanners, and they only use them like 4 hours a day. There should be 24-hour rolling staff for those expensive machines.
And when they break, then they're out of practice.
It's things like that.
There's more broken equipment than there is working equipment.
It's stuff like that.
Just a minute, Ash, just a minute. Let me just give you a couple of views of a couple of
texts flooded in.
They're calling in their hundreds. The NHS could save millions by dealing with waste and staff theft, according to Mick. The BMA and junior doctors are using sick people as political weapons. They're not fit to be doctors, says Maureen. And I haven't frightened you, I know, and you've stuck up and done really well. I'm not patronising, I'm just saying.
Yeah, a bit patronising.
I've had blokes get up and walk out because they get upset. But to get to this sort of... I've learned quite a lot having you in here today.
Thanks, man.
Not you. Oh. And I think it's been really worthwhile, because I think doctors keep coming up to me, the ones who sympathise with the strike. So we've got lots of public sympathy. There really isn't. Because on social media, on the media, radio, TV, wherever we are, I can tell you very few people are sympathetic with me.
Sadly, the public are caught in the middle. And, you know, we really need to think about the public, think about the patients, and prioritise the patients here and not get into the politics of it.
Which the strikes aren't doing. They're prioritising themselves.
Well, we want to start the conversation. The conversation has been, we are willing to come forward and start the discussions again. But they're really...
Then come off strike.
Also, they asked in the hospital for some doctors in an emergency to come off strike, and the BMA allowed one doctor.
Well, this is the thing. That's another thing I want to add, that doctors have agreed that if there are staffing problems to the extent of safety issues in a hospital...
and they only allowed one doctor, apparently.
Well, because they have to prove, the hospital has to show that they haven't tried their best to get all the other staffing resources. A lot of these hospitals are not even... They're trying to avoid filling out forms, not going through the proper protocol.
Well, they were having to hire private for £3,000 a day, some consultants.
And do you think that's justifiable?
Well, no, it's terrible, isn't it?
It's terrible. A consultant was getting charged, I mean, at my hospital, was charging £200 an hour to do my shift, and I wasn't striking, by the way, and I wasn't getting paid that much at all.
Well, no, you won't until you get older and you've got more experience.
She could do.
Well, tell me why a consultant should be getting paid £200 an hour.
We've got to get rid of agencies.
The shifts.
That's the
and
thing.
Tell me why the government is allowed to spend £2 billion to basically just fill this hole, instead of just coming to the table, discussing and agreeing to £1 billion an hour, which pays 35,000 people in this country. That's a lot of people. That's not £1 billion per person.
And the reason they're doing it is because they can and they can get it. And it shouldn't be that way. And we should be training more of our own doctors.